Let's speak to Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley. He's an author and historian, and he joins us from Washington. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Dr. Tarpley.
Good evening.
Now, blaming Israel and Saudi Arabia, what do you make of this in as far as we have heard Israeli officials in the past say that they would much prefer Takfiri militants take over Syria than to see Bashar al-Assad in power?
Well, we're, of course, approaching these Moscow talks, right, about 1 year after the U.S. and others sabotaged the Geneva talks the first time around, or the second time. We're now getting another round, this time under the sponsorship of President Putin. So that's something that might have some promise. When Moallem says the Israelis, this is, I think, a very interesting thing to look at. The Israelis have been the ones that have been most active in bombing, in actually interfering militarily inside Syria. And they have picked targets that punish certain groups and also favor other groups. And I think the idea that Moallem is putting out, that Israel has picked a horse. They've decided to support Nusra. They've got a long history of doing that. But the Nusra brigades, who are, of course, Al-Qaeda. So here we have Netanyahu, the architect of this policy, coming to Washington, and he expects to address a joint session of Congress, which used to be an honor reserved to very special statesmen, right? It was something they gave to Churchill or somebody of this caliber. But now we get Netanyahu, who's doing this as part of his cynical election campaign, and this is the guy who is using the Israeli Air Force in particular to try to help Nusra. So he's trying to foment and promote more power for Al-Qaeda inside Syria. And the other side of the coin is the Israeli pattern of attack seemed to pick out targets that are going to hurt the Hezbollah. So the idea is if you're actually fighting the terrorists, as Hezbollah has been doing, then you're going to get hit by the Israeli forces. And there's also then the third dimension of this is assassinations, that if foreign dignitaries or foreign experts are brought in by the Syrian government to help them in their anti-terrorist campaign, then the Israelis seem to feel free to come in and conduct what amounts to state terrorism, assassinations of such people. So I think that's a very important side. The other one, of course, is the Saudis. Moallem's recent speeches have actually put the Saudis and Qatar sort of in the same area. But the warning to Saudi Arabia is, don't do this because this will come back to haunt you. And with Qatar, Moallem's been saying, look, you've overreached, right? You're this tiny little place. You should get out of Libya, get out of Egypt, get out of Tunisia, get out of Syria, and so on down the line. So it's part of the maneuvering. And as far as Ford is concerned, this is now the Negroponte-Ford tandem. In other words, the man whose name is forever associated with death squads in Central America and Iraq and in Syria too. John Negroponte, this guy Ford is his protege. So you can see Ford is interfering in those Moscow talks. The document in question is a very bland document that just says there should be peace and territorial integrity in Syria. But the word coming from the State Department is always telling these puppets of the Syrian National Coalition who live in hotels, right? Telling them, don't make a deal, don't negotiate in good faith, don't be reasonable, let's keep this going as long as we possibly can. So that's just the bankruptcy of the U.S. policy.
Right, but Dr. Tarpley, very quickly, if you can, what kind of benefits does the U.S., the West, even Israel and Saudi Arabia see in fomenting this Takfirism in a place like Syria? Because as we've seen in France, as we've seen in Australia, they cry foul when these terrorists go back to their home countries and launch attacks there.
Sure. I think Syria has two sides. One, of course, is that it's a nationalist government strong enough to say no on any number of points. And the other side of it is that Syria really is a bastion of tolerance. I've traveled there, very impressed by the idea that you have all kinds of people, be they Shiites or Sunnis or Druzes or Kurds or Maronites, Melkites, you name it. Everybody in Syria was, I think, getting along reasonably well. You did have a kind of an underground tradition of violent rebellion. But the big change, of course, was when Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the rest of them put out the call for fighters and terrorists to come in there and fight Assad. And then you have the Israelis intervening with the air power at key points to help the terrorists along. So I think that's sort of the situation in a nutshell.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for now. I'm afraid time's gotten the better of us. Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley joining us from Washington. He's an author and historian. Dr. Tarpley, it's always good talking to you on Press TV.